Thank you very much for joining us this morning. A terrible shock, terribly sad news.
Well, it was absolutely. To be woken up with that news this morning was devastating. And by the way, Charles was best man at my wedding and is actually the godfather to one of my daughters. So we do have very close ties. We were elected on the same day 32 years ago and spent our entire period in Parliament together. So he's certainly somebody that's been an absolutely central part of my entire political career, as well as a very close friend.
And how will you remember him?
Well, I remember him as that. I mean, I remember that he was always wanting to talk. He had that sort of very objective view about politics. He saw it from all sides. And I think also he saw it from ordinary people's perspectives. He was always looking both at other parties and our own and saying, what matters to people? How do we get through to people? And I think he had that wonderful, warm style that made him accessible and made him listened to when other politicians were not. And indeed, he was never pompous. He was actually quite shy and only offered his views when he felt that they were right and appreciated. So he was thoughtful, he was considerate, and he was somebody who really enjoyed his friends and appreciated it, and did it always with charm, with humour, and a lot of actual self-deprecation. He was not conceited, he was not pompous, and I think that's what's made him so popular and why he'll be so missed. Self-deprecating,
but a very strong politician in the sense that he knew his own mind. He had very strong beliefs.
Well, he did. I mean, he was very, very committed to Britain's membership of the European Union. And recently he had been a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe and was able, therefore, to engage in European-wide politics. Really important to him. But he was a proud Highlander. He was a great reformer. He was, I think, achieved an awful lot for both our party and British politics. On issues like the Iraq War, he was absolutely clear that this was the wrong thing to do, and that Britain's interests didn't always depend on following America, but that we had to make our own judgments. He would take the same view about Scotland, I think, as well. And he clearly saw changes happening in Scotland. I had a long chat with him just before the election, before we went our separate ways. And he recognised that all kinds of people who wished him well and thought well of him were nevertheless voting SNP. And he found that, I think, a little difficult to take, as we all did. But being Charles, he did it with a degree of humour and dismissiveness that perhaps we all should learn from.
How hard did it hit him when he lost his seat? It's a brutal game, and you're in 1 minute and out the next.
Well, he was in for 32 years, so it wasn't a short career. And of course, he would have been, I think, deeply hurt as well as disappointed. But he had to look across something much worse, really, that the party that he had helped to build and which had done so well, which he'd had the greatest electoral success in terms of seats, was devastated across the UK. And I think he would have taken that very much to heart, as we all have. I think people do sometimes say that the fact that you're overwhelmed by a tidal wave that you have no control of, in some ways makes it easier to bear because others share the same fate, but it nevertheless doesn't make it something that you'd welcome. And I think we will miss him, because both in terms of the dynamic future of where Scotland is going, and we need a serious debate about where Scotland is going, and also about where the UK is going in relation to Europe and the kind of country we are. Charles would always have had something very relevant, very direct to say, and something that most people would have responded to. And we don't have very many politicians who have that quality, and I think that's where he will be missed. But he was also a human being. He loved the crack, he loved the chat, he loved to poke fun both at himself and other people, and not take anything or anyone too seriously, whilst never forgetting there were some deep commitments he felt very passionate about.
He did speak about his drinking problems. They cut short his leadership of the party. Was it something that concerned you over the years?
I think it concerned all of us, and I think it's very, very difficult when you see a friend struggling with a problem and perhaps not entirely facing up to it. And what you saw in Charles was somebody who much of the time was his sparkling, engaging self, and then obviously at times just didn't cope. And I think we all felt very sad and disappointed. We tried to reach out. We hoped he was coping with it, but he wasn't always. He did a great job for the party, and we didn't handle his departure well. But I think people who perhaps couldn't see it as closely as we could would not have appreciated that it came to a head. So of course it was a problem, and of course we were all concerned about it. But it doesn't detract in any way from the really remarkable qualities he had, which may be even part of the problem. He was gregarious. He was congenial. He did like a drink, and that used to be part of his charm until it in fact took some hold on him. So I think we should recognise this was a man that had a very relaxed style, very accessible style that ordinary people could relate to, and politics needs people like that probably more than ever, and he will really be sadly missed because his observations were always something worth hearing.
Sir Malcolm Bruce, thank you very much for joining us.